Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Starting?
We're starting.
Right, we're going to start with Yadid Nefesh, page 128. Yadid Nefesh Av HaRachaman, Yadid Nefesh Av HaRachaman, Meshoch Avdecha, El Retzonecha, Meshoch Avdecha, Yadadadadadai, El Retzonecha, Yarut Avdecha, Kemo Ayar, Yishtachavei, Yadadadadadai, El Muladarecha, Yadid Nefesh, Yadid Nefesh Av HaRachaman, Yadid Nefesh Av HaRachaman, Meshoch Avdecha, El Retzonecha, Meshoch Avdecha, Yadadadadadai, El Retzonecha. Turning to page 142, we're going to welcome in Shabbat with Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Amalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem, Boachem Leshalom, Malachei Ashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Amalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni Leshalom, Malachei Ashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Amalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzeitzchem, Tzeitzchem Leshalom, Malachei Ashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Amalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Sorry to have abandoned you on the bima. You almost got very lucky. I left my sermon on my desk, but I got it. So.
Oh, that's important.
Sorry. So at our home tonight, there are 3 Israelis, camp counselors, who every year at camps, Jewish camps across North America, in sort of a reverse birthright program, particularly the Reform and the Conservative camps, but really amongst all the Jewish camps, there's something called the Mishlachat, which are these post-army Israeli young 20-year-olds that have never experienced American or North American progressive Judaism, most likely, although now more and more of them have had some taste of Reform Judaism or progressive Judaism in Israel. And they spend the summer at Jewish summer camps, and they learn Judaism in a way that they have never been exposed to before. Not growing up in Israel, and not growing up, many of them, in either secular communities or some even in Orthodox communities, or at least their grandparents' Orthodox communities. So every year at the end of camp, we offer to whoever's coming to Canada, because there's always some coming over the border from Seattle, where the camp is, into Vancouver to come stay at our home, and between 3 and 5 take us up on it every year. And so this evening they arrived. They went to Chinatown. We had to explain the downtown east side to them a little bit. They don't have that very much in Israel. And then we had sushi for them, which is sort of our typical, not our typical Shabbat dinner, but when you have Israelis who have been at camp for 2 months, sushi's the way to go. And so we were explaining to them a bit more about Judaism in Canada, and they were explaining that it was not until they had been to summer camps that they saw men and women praying together, that they saw women as rabbis or cantors, that they heard prayers and tefillot that connected for them, that had a spiritual meaning. Now, granted, they're not translating from the Hebrew, right? So the Hebrew is the words that speak to them. But I really had a sense that as much as we think of Israel as giving us inspiration and focus in what we do, and it certainly does, that this is an opportunity that we have had now for, I don't know, a dozen years or more, to really make an impact on Judaism in Israel because of what we do here. And it's this wonderful exchange program, and it's inspiring to send them home with what Shabbos is like here. We think of Shabbat in Israel and Shabbat in Jerusalem as being the penultimate Shabbos experience, and in many ways it is, for sure. But so is what we do here. And what we do here has profound value for that, at least, young generation of Israeli Jews who take what they've experienced here and in the camps and bring it back to their circle of friends. And it's just a wonderful exchange. So that was my Shabbos dinner. I hope you all had a lovely Shabbos dinner. So whether you had sushi or not, I hope you had one as well. We're going to begin Shabbat, as many of us do at home, with the lighting of the Shabbat candles. And to do that, we want to ask Barb and Katrina to come stand at the center podium. I did find the reading. To lead us in a reading on page 121, and then the lighting of the Shabbos candles. Go first to the reading.
All the way to the middle.
To the middle. Right there, where the microphone is.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all those who behold us.
As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light.
Some of you come every week and know that we still have this candle issue.
This is the hardest part of the service.
Right.
It's a good lesson in perseverance.
And patience.
Yes.
Well done.
So we'll say the blessing together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Shabbat Shalom.
So we start our service with Kabbalat Shabbat, a set of psalms culminating in Lecha Dodi, our piyut, our liturgical poem, all to bridge this time in between the week, Chol, and the sacred time and space of Shabbat. So we kind of need a ramp up period to warm us into Shabbat.
How warm as it is.
It's pretty warm, but thankfully the AC is running. We can warm up our spirits. We start on page 130 with Psalm 95, Lechu Neranena. And if you don't feel like you can follow along with the Hebrew, there's a lot of words. You can always sing Yalalai. We like Yalalais. Lechu Neranena Adonai, Nari Aletzur Yisheinu. Lechu Neranena Adonai, Nari Aletzur Yisheinu. Lekadma Fana Betoda Izmirot Nari Alo. Lekadma Fana Betoda On the next page, 131, Psalm 96, Shiru Ladonai, Shir Hadash. We sing to God a new song. Shiru Ladonai, Shir Hadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz, Shiru Ladonai, Baruch Shemo, Basru miyom le'yom, Yeshuato, Sapru bagoyim. Page 133. These more Shir Ladonai. See if you can feel slightly more warmed up spiritually, mentally. I don't know. Give it a shot. Mizmor Shir Ladonai, Shir Hadash, Ki niflaot asa, Oshia lo yamino zroa kodshadia, Adonai Yeshuato, Le'nei hagoyim gilad simchato, Zachar chasto emunato, Le'beit Yisrael, Ra'u chol nafsei haaretz, Et Yeshuat Eloheinu, Hariu l'Adonai kol haaretz, Nitzvu v'ranenu v'sa, Yalalai, Yalai, lai, 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 yai, lai, lai, Yalai, lai, 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 yai, lai, lai, Yalai, lai, 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 yai, lai, lai, Yai, lai, 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 Yalalai, Yalai, lai, 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 yai, lai, lai, Yalai, lai, 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 Yalai, lai, 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 yai, lai, lai, Yai, lai, 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 lai. On the top of 134, Zamru Ladonai. Zameru Ladonai v'chinor, v'chinor v'kol zimra. Zameru Ladonai v'chinor, v'chinor v'kol zimra. Zameru, zamro, Ladonai. Zameru, zamro, Ladonai. Zameru Ladonai v'chinor, v'chinor v'kol zimra. Zameru Ladonai v'chinor, v'chinor v'kol zimra. So we have arrived at Lecha Dodi, page 138. So whether you were able to follow along or you were like, wow, that was a lot of new tunes and lots of Hebrew, You can take a breath. Lechadodi, it has that short chorus. We're going to build it up. This tune's actually from Israel, so from a synagogue in Jerusalem. Kol HaNeshama is what this setting is called. And when we get to the last verse, we're all going to stand up, face the entrance to greet the Sabbath bride. Lechadodi likrat kala yadadai 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 b'nei Shabbat lekabela. Lechadodi likrat kala yadadai 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 b'nei Shabbat lekabela. Shamor v'zachor v'dibor echad yishmi'anu el hamiuchad. Adonai echad u'shmo echad le'shemo tiferet ve'litzila lecha. Lechadodi likrat kala yadadai 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 b'nei Shabbat lekabela. Lechadodi likrat kala yadadai 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 b'nei Shabbat lekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu benelcha ki mekor haberacha merosh mikedem nesucha sof maaseh v'machshava tchila. Lechadodi likrat kala yadadai 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 b'nei Shabbat lekabela. Lechadodi likrat kala yadadai 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 b'nei Shabbat lekabela. Verse 3. Mikdash melech ir melucha kumitzei mitoch ha'afecha rav lach shevet be'mekabacha heu yachamon alayich chela. Lechadodi likrat kala yadadai 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 b'nei Shabbat lekabela. Lechadodi likrat kala yadadai 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 b'nei Shabbat lekabela. Verse 5. Hitoreri, hitoreri, hivaorech umiori, uri, uri, shidaveri, kevod Adonai alayich miglal. Lechadodi likrat kala yadadai 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 b'nei Shabbat lekabela. Lechadodi likrat kala yadadai 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 b'nei Shabbat lekabela.
We rise and face the door to greet the Sabbath bride.
Boi v'shalom ateres mala gam besimcha u'betola toch emunei am segula boi chala boi chala. Facing front, all together, one last time. Lechadodi likrat kala yadadai 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 b'nei Shabbat lekabela. Even louder. Lechadodi likrat kala yadadai 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 b'nei Shabbat lekabela.
We'll remain standing. We're going to turn to page 263 for Chatzi Kaddish as we transition from that warm-up portion of the service to the Shema and its blessings. And as we do, we want to invite Itan to come up to prepare to lead the rest of our service. Chatzi Kaddish, page 263.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ועלמד יברח חירותי וימליך מלכותי, וחייכון וביומכון, ובחיי כל בית ישראל, בגלה בגלה, ובזמן קריב ואימרו, אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ולעולמי המיה, וישמח וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמי קודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה ושבחתה ונחמתה תמירן בעלמא ואמרו Amen.
We'll remain standing for the Baruch Hu.
Barehu Adonai Hamevora.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam.
Baruch Adonai Hamvora Leolam Va'ed. Please be seated. Baruch atah Adonai Elcheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bidvaro Ma'ariv Aravim V'chochma Poteach Sha'arim V'Itvanu Mashenech Itim Machalef et Hazamim Umsadir et Hakohavim B'mishmorotehem Ba'arakia Kitzono Bore Yom V'Laila Gulei Or Mipnei Chosheh V'Chosheh Mipnei Or Umavir Yom V'Laila Umavdio Ben Yom V'Laila Adonai Tzavot Shemo V'chai V'chayam Tamid Yimloch Aleinu Leolam Va'ed Baruch atah Adonai Hamariv Aravim.
Amen.
Page 266.
Ahavat Olam Beit Israel Amcha Avta Torah Umizvot Hukim Shpatim Otanu Limata Elkein Adonai Eloheinu B'Sholbeinu Uvkumeinu Naseya Behukeha Beneath Ma'borei Torotecha U'mitzvotecha Leolam Leolam Va'ed Ki hem hayenu ve'orach yameinu uvahem negeh yomam v'layla.
ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed.
Page 268, Ve'ahavta.
Ve'afta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levcha u'v'chol nefshecha u'v'chol meodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'elech asher nohi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinamtam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivticha b'vitecha uvlecha uterech ukshobcha uvkumecha ukshartam leot al yedecha vehayu latotafot benenecha uktavtam al mazuzot betecha uvisharecha leman tiskeru vasitem ekol mitzvotai vehitem kiddoshim le'elohechem Ani Adonai Elohechem Asher hodseti ehem me'eretz Mitzrayim lehiot lahem le'elohim Ani Adonai Elohechem.
Adonai Lehem Emet. We'll continue responsibly in the English, page 269.
We worship the power that unites the universe, a promise of harmony for all.
Yet that oneness eludes our grasp as imperfection and evil abound.
Before our eyes there is a vision of perfection, order, and goodness.
There is evil enough to break the heart, and there is good enough to exalt the soul.
When will redemption come?
When we grant everyone what we claim for ourselves.
Long ago we escaped the tyranny of Egypt. Our people saw the power of the Most High.
We learned God's presence redeems time and event, so we celebrate this power that makes for freedom.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש. נורא תהילות אוסף אלה, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה. מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקע ים לפני משה ומרים, זה עלינו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך, אדוני ימלוך, לעולם ועד. ונאמר כי ודע אדוני את יעקב, וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל ישראל.
Amen. I was one of those kids that grew up in a home where at bedtime my parents would come into my room and we would say a prayer together before we went to sleep. Did anybody else grow up in a house like that? Not my house, but your own house. It was the Shema that we would say, and the Shema al-Hamitah, which is part of the larger part of that bedtime ritual, includes the Hashkivena that we're about to sing. And I still do it just about every night if I haven't already fallen asleep to the television or set. And I've thought a bit, and I wanted you to think tonight also, about how that prayer has changed from when I was a kid and the things that I prayed for then, whether it was monsters not to come out of my closet or for baseball cards to show up in my closet, and the things that I pray for now, which are generally not material things. And there are still monsters in the prayers. But the prayers have become much more about the people in my life. They become much more expansive. Because as we go through life, we accumulate, God willing, people and concerns about people. And we incorporate them into our prayers. And if we think about the exponential factor of that we hold others in our prayers and they hold us in theirs, and that concentric circle of connection that we create through that sacred moment before we go to sleep, which is not in a sanctuary and there's no rabbi and there's no Torah. It's just us and our thoughts and our own sense of spirituality. Holiness exists there, and we hold others in our prayers there in a very holy way. I don't think we should ever grow out of that. I think that wherever we go with our sense of spirituality and our rationalization of God and all of those things, that sense of concern, that sense of holiness and of hope and of love that we hold in ourselves and grows as we grow older, I think it's a blessing. And maybe even more so to then share that with our children and our grandchildren, to continue that Lador Vador from generation to generation. And so as we sing Hashkivenu with the cantor now, think of your own nighttime prayers, your own bedtime hopes and prayers for yourself and for others. And if you don't say them tonight before bed, maybe we can say them now. Page 271, Hashkivenu.
Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu leshalom, v'hamitenu shomreinu lechaim. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu leshalom, v'hamitenu shomreinu lechaim. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu leshalom, v'hamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Last two lines. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'poreh sukat shalom, aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael, beini uvein b'nei Yisrael, beini uvein b'nei Yisrael, oti le'olam. Yam b'rai-rai-rai, shalom. yum ba da 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 da. Shabbat, Shabbat, yum ba da 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 da. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש, שבת ויהי נפש. ים בדאי דאי דאי, שבת שבת ים בדאי דאי דאי, שבת שבת ים בדאי דאי דאי, שבת שבת Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom.
Adonai, Sephatai Tiftachu, Fi Yagid Tehilatecha. Eternal God, help us find the words that we might speak with you in prayer. We rise, page 274, the Amidah.
Baruch atah Adonai, Elohei Elohim Eloheinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rikav, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, El Hagadol, Hagibor, Vehanora, El Elyon, Gomei Hasadim, Tovim, Vinokeh Hako, Vizocher Hase Avot Vaimaho, Umevagdula, Livnehem, Leman Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Gozer, Umashia, Umalgin, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Vezrat Serah. Atagi bor leolam Adonai, mechaye metim atarav Hoshia, morid hata, makayel chamim bechesed, mechaye metim beracharim rabim, so menofrim rofe cholim, umatzir asurim, umachayem emunato, lishene afar. Micha mocha baguvru, umidome melech me hayeh, umatzmiach Yeshua, Rama tala hayot metim, Baruch atah Adonai, mechaye hametim.
אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
You are holy, your name is holy, and those who are holy praise you every day. Blessed are you, Adonai, the holy God. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh.
Amen.
Please be seated. We continue on page 277, the bottom paragraph of the page.
קדשנו במצוותיך ותן חלקנו בתורתך. קדשנו במצוותיך ותן חלקנו בתורתך. צווינו מטובך ושמחנו בישועתך. צווינו מטובך ושמחנו בישועתך.
In the middle of page 278, may these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day, and may we all live in such a way that this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat.
Amen. Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu be'amecha Yisrael u'tefila רצון, תמיד עבודת ישראל. ישראל עמך, אל קרוב לכל קורב, פני אל עבדיך וחוננו, שפוך רוחך עלינו, ותחזינה עינינו, ושובך לציון. ברחמים, ברוך אתה, אדוני, המחזיר שכינתו לציון, לציון.
מודים אנחנו לך שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו, ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו לעולם ועד. סור חיינו מגן ישוענו אתה הוא לדור ודור. נודה לך ונספר תהילתך, על חיינו מסורים בידיך, ועל נשמותינו הפקדות לך. And we'll continue the last 4 lines in Hebrew, page 280.
ועל ניסך שבכל יום, ערב ובוקר וצהריים, מעולם קיווינו לך, מעולם קיווינו לך, הטוב כי לך לא רחמך, והמרחם כי לא תמו חסדיך, מעולם קיווינו לך, מעולם קיווינו לך.
Page 282, a prayer for peace. Shalom Rav.
שלום רב על ישראל עמך, תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך, תשים לעולם. כי אתה הוא מלך אדון לכל השלום. כי אתה הוא מלך אדון לכל השלום. שלום רב על ישראל עמך, תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך, תשים לעולם. בטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל, בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שלום רב על ישראל עמך, תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך, תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם, תשים לעולם.
We take a moment for our own private prayers and meditations. Turn to page 371. We'll find the words of Mishaberach, a prayer for healing there. As we as a community join our hearts and our prayers together for those who are sick and in need of healing, we ask God's blessing on the grandmother of our bar mitzvah, on Doreen Irving, Matt Good, Jill Light, Alicia Eckersley, Sipa Bat Ita, Hannah Bild, Edward Dodick, Brian Tapley, Pascal Hegman Lyson, Leto and Jay, Mordechai Ben Sarah, Alan Pitch, Yona Neri Ben Avraham Vasara, Adele Kirkle, Julian Carney, Eli Pont, Asher Gavriel Ben Mordechai Yehoshua Vasara Elishev, Riley Tregelbov, David Coulter, Apollina Wilshensky, Elena Cobb, Annette Albert, Carla Zavot, Rose Godfrey, Doris Medved, Janet Gelb, Jean Angus, Yehudit Bat Avraham Vasara, Isabel, Judy Steiner Losberg, David Shlomo Gorney, Andrea Jarzlebach. There are others who are in need of prayers of healing. If you could rise and call out their name one by one in the midst of our congregation. We join with our cantor, a prayer for healing of Misha Berach, page 371.
Misha Berach Avotenu Bekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach imotenu bekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
So Shabbat Shalom. A mazel tov again to Itan and his family on this wonderful simcha and weekend. You did great so far. I know you do great tomorrow. We thank you for allowing us to share in this simcha with your family. And we thank you for sponsoring the oneg that's following the service. And my goal is to not get too far between you and the oneg, so I won't speak for too long, I promise. To just draw your attention to the handout tonight and a few announcements. We have a wonderful new parent and babies group.
That event has been postponed to the 15th.
But it's still wonderful.
It's still wonderful, and you should, if you know anyone who has a new baby, you should totally join.
Totally join. So I guess it's been postponed to September 15th, but they will be gathering at some point at that time, and they're going to be meeting with a baby coach, Adele Chu, on the basics of helping babies sleep better. I might just attend that for myself. Our sisterhood has a walk on Sunday, September 4th, a walk in the woods at Pacific Spirit Park at 11 a.m. This is, I think, an almost weekly event, if not weekly, then twice a month. So you can find the information there on the handout. On September 7th, right here in the sanctuary at 6 p.m., we're really pleased and honored to host, in partnership with CIJA and the Jewish Federation and the rest of the Jewish community, a pre-election Vancouver Mayoral Town Forum. And the 4 or 5 candidates for mayor, top 5 candidates for mayor, will be here in the sanctuary answering questions and with a moderated discussion. So I hope that you'll join us for that. We'll be live streaming that as well. It'll be on the Telus channel and on our website and on YouTube. But if you'd like to be here in person, we invite you to do so. Lastly, the province is in desperate need of blood. And Temple Shalom actually has a blood team. And if you would be able to do this life-saving mitzvah, pikuach nefesh, of saving a life, to go down to the blood bank here on Oak Street, you can just tell them you're with Temple Shalom, and that will go towards whatever our total amount of blood we're collecting is. It's really not about the amount there, but amount that they need. And so please, if you could help us to do that mitzvah, tremendously needed. So my papa, David Kipnis, was the bar mitzvah tutor at Congregation Shereth Israel in San Francisco, California in the 1970s and 80s. He owned a liquor store during the day, and he was the bar mitzvah tutor in the afternoon, I guess, probably not at night, but in the afternoon. It was the original gig economy, his side hustle. My grandmother was the confirmation teacher in that same Reformed synagogue in San Francisco, a historic Reformed synagogue in San Francisco. If you've ever been, it's the one with the dome. It's not Temple Emmanuel, they had all the money. Shereth Israel, I'll say, had all the worker Jews. But it's where the UN Charter was actually signed in San Francisco, or the League of Nations, not the UN. Anyhow, that was the family synagogue. You could say that I entered the family business, so to speak. My papa died 30 years ago, and like many who knew our grandparents before we ourselves became adults and entered into our careers and had families, I often wonder what he would think of the world that we live in today. What would he think? Would he think that things are better with the internet, with 500 channels on television and nothing on, with cell phones and DoorDash and Uber and all sorts of other things? Or would he, like many I know, long for a simpler time? The romanticized version of a bygone era when everything and every family was like Leave It to Beaver. All wars were between good and evil, and good won. Politics was never personal, and every family had a home and could afford a vacation once or twice a year. That time, of course, never existed, except in our mind. Leave It to Beaver was as fantastical then as Star Trek is, I want to say now, but something else is probably more fantastical than Star Trek. But we don't remember it that way. What started me thinking about this, and why I started with my grandfather, the bar mitzvah tutor, was a packet of letters that I got in the mail early this week. See, the rabbi of that congregation, Shereth Israel, where my papa and my grandmother were such active members, was Rabbi Marty Weiner. And Rabbi Weiner died last year, Aleva Shalom. His son, Danny, who has an excellent name, also became a rabbi, and he's a rabbi at Temple Hirsch Sinai in Seattle, Washington, just over the border. And we're friends. Earlier this week, I got a big envelope from Rabbi Weiner, the younger, and in it was a stack of handwritten notes that my papa had prepared about each of his bar mitzvah students as monthly reports to Rabbi Weiner, the elder. And these are those handwritten notes. With his son's thoughtful effort, what had been in my papa's hand, and then in Rabbi Weiner's hand, is now in my hands. They are remarkable in how unremarkable they are. Let me read you just a few sentences of a couple. And my papa had handwriting that it really challenges me, but it was beautiful handwriting, just not what I'm used to. Let's see. Eric Sweet, just 11 years old. He lives in Marin County. His mother was very unhappy with the prayers in the Hebrew school. I first met Eric in November of 1978, and he had no idea whatsoever of what he had been doing in our school. We're making progress now. His Hebrew primer is doing better work. He can read some siddur phrases, but he has a long way to go. Daniel Benjamin, bar mitzvah in June of 1980. David. First met David in November of 78. He was having problems in the Hebrew school. He is still having difficulty with the fundamentals and is slowly maturing, but this will take a long time. I could go on. I met Jonathan. This is Jonathan Franklin. There are girls on here too. I just happened to pick these three. I met with Jonathan the first time last week. His comprehension of the vowels is very poor, and his preparation of the letters, her perception of the letters are faulty as well. He was happy to learn of the reader and the help, and I hope that I gave Jonathan a thorough review workout, and then we concentrated on reading so that the cantor, when working with him, would not be so challenged. It goes on. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? Ein chadash tachat hashemesh. There's nothing new under the sun, Kohelet wrote in Ecclesiastes. Meaning that things that we assume have never before existed or happened have their origins in something that we already have or have experienced, that already has or we have experienced. And when I read these notes, I thought of a letter that I first read in rabbinical school in a class on American Jewish history, which by definition is not that old, American Jewish history, compared to Jewish history in general, which is thousands of years old. And this letter was written in the 1830s. And it was sent by the rabbi and the temple president to every single student and their parents in the congregation. Nearly 200 years ago, it said something to the effect of, quote, if students do not show up at synagogue on Saturday mornings and do not participate more regularly in the service, they will not be afforded the honor of having a bar mitzvah. It was only bar mitzvahs back then. Students and parents must do a better job of honoring their commitment to Torah and the congregation if they want to have this honor in front of our congregation. Now, the letter stood out for me then, and it stayed with me for 25 years because, like my papa's notes, it could have been written yesterday, that letter of 200 years ago. It could have been written by me. In fact, I know I have sent a similar letter like that at some point in my rabbinate, probably more than once. We have this habit of romanticizing the past, a cognitive tendency to selectively remember the past as better than it was, especially when the present isn't so great and doesn't feel so good. And I hear this a lot. I hear it a lot lately in conversations with other parents. And it's not just about longing for the good old days. It also reflects a deep dissatisfaction, maybe even a resignation, with the state of the world and the society that we currently live in. I think I first started to feel old when I caught myself criticizing the choices of current generations in their work habits, in their parenting, in their politics, and all the things that we use to measure the relative success of one generation compared to another. I first caught myself effectively starting a sentence by saying something like, kids these days, and finish that sentence with a sigh, or in my case, more likely, an oi. And I knew then two things. One, that I was old, or older, and two, that I was using a very selective memory in elevating the work ethics and values and civic culture of my own generation over that of the present. And how many of us have looked at someone maybe in tattoos or multicolored hair or many manner of trendy clothing that we don't quite understand and rolled our eyes figuratively or actually and said something to the effect of, well, I never. Maybe our own experiences in Hebrew school, if we have had them, is an exception to the rule. Maybe no one remembers those days as full of rainbows and unicorns, your days in Sunday school. I once overheard a father say to their child, quote, I hated Hebrew school. Your grandfather hated Hebrew school, and so you will hate Hebrew school. That's how it's supposed to be. That's how God intended it. That's the meaning of Lador Vador, la generation to generation, end quote. Really, I heard a father say that. I will not comment on whether or not I might be related to that father. But more often, so many things are simply not as bad or as good as we remember them to be. There's a common misconception that memories are accurate records of the past, pristinely preserved mental filing cabinets. They are not. Memory doesn't really work like that. Ann Wilson, a professor of psychology at the Wilfrid Laurier University, whose research broadly focuses on memory and time and identity, she said, "We reconstruct what happened in the past on the basis of little bits and pieces of memory. We're acting like archaeologists, picking up the pieces and putting them back together." This doesn't mean we consciously distort or embellish our memories, but the process of retrieving memories is highly reconstructive and prone to various biases. Which brings me then to one of my favorite images in the whole of the Torah, and it occurs in this week's Parsha, in Parshat Ekev, the Torah portion that Etan and Marty and Katrina are going to chant tomorrow morning. In the Parsha, from the middle of this book of Deuteronomy, which is the last book in the Torah, a recounting of the whole story of the Israelites from the time they left Egypt until they come to the promised land and enter into the land. Because remember, this 35 or so chapters of Deuteronomy is just one long speech by Moses. He's kind of standing there at the shore of the sea and says, "Wait, before we go in, I just want to say one thing." And then he goes on for an entire book of the Torah. And we have in there the retelling of the story of the golden calf and the first set of tablets and then the second set of tablets. Remember, there were two sets. So, leaving aside for a moment what happened at the golden calf, if you're going to retell the story of the Jewish people in a summary, in a nutshell, why does Moses include that story? Why include the time when they rebelled against God? Why include the time when they were so scared that they melted down their jewelry and the rings from their ears into a golden calf and they bowed down and prayed to it? You saw the movie, Charlton Heston, you saw it. Why put that in? And the answer comes from the imagery that is in this Parsha, because it speaks very eloquently about the broken tablets. That first set. Remember, Moses comes down the mountain, sees them dancing with the golden calf, and he smashes the tablets into what I assume is dozens of pieces. And then he has this argument with God, and God says, "I'll get you a new people. You deserve better than this. We can do better." And Moses says, "No, you can't do that. Because then what are they going to say? You brought us out of Egypt just to kill them. You can't do that, God. That's not good for you or for me." And so they work it out, and Moses goes back up the mountain, and that first set, God carved with God's divine hand, right? And fire, and white fire, and black flame. The second set Moses has to do with his own hand. 40 days and 40 nights again. Comes back down this time, right, with the next set. But the question, and it's answered in our Parsha, or at least in the Midrash, is what happened to that first set? Those are holy tablets. You can't sell that on eBay. I guess you could. You could make a fortune. That's God's handiwork. And the answer is they put those broken sets of tablets, all those shards, all those pieces, into the Ark of the Covenant. You saw Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's the thing we're talking about. They put it into the Ark of the Covenant. And then on top of that, Moses, Aaron, the Israelites placed the whole set, the second set of tablets, the ones that Moses carved by hand. And they schlepped that through the desert for 40 years, twice as heavy as it would have been. Why? Because of memory. Because the good old days weren't always good old days. And the brokenness, our mistakes, they serve as a foundation for our wholeness. They serve as a foundation for who we grow and become to be. And our Parsha and our tradition teach us something that my papa's notes taught me, that letter from the 1830s teaches us. Remember it as it was. Not rainbows and unicorns and glossing over the difficult parts, the hard parts, the broken parts. Remember the hard parts, because that's where growth comes. We don't learn anything from our successes. We learn everything from our mistakes. And it's right there in the Parsha. I loved reading these notes because it reminds me that rabbis and Jewish educators and cantors have been struggling with this same challenge, and we still haven't gotten it right, although it's better at our school than it was there. We still haven't gotten it right in however many years it has been, but we're working on it. And we shouldn't romanticize it to think that Every child that went to Hebrew school pre-1980 was a scholar and a scribe and chanted the whole Torah and knew the prayers backwards and forwards. No, they didn't. Your parents didn't either. But if we remember that, we can learn from it. We can keep working on it. But if we gloss over it, we've lost it all. The broken tablets, those broken shards that are in your life of your own mistakes, they're the foundation for your wholeness. They're the foundation upon which we will grow and have successes and learn. And that's what our Torah teaches us. Shabbat Shalom. Our service continues. Page 586 will rise for Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר ארץ, ומושב יקרם בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו, בגובה מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום בהשבות אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת. אין עוד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
Please be seated. A reading before Kaddish Yatom, before the mourner's Kaddish, page 594. Why should I wish to see God better than this day? I see something of God in each hour of the 24 and each moment then. In the faces of men and women I see God, in my own face in the glass. I find the letters from God dropped in the street, and every one is signed by God's name. And I leave them there where they are, for I know that wheresoever I go, others will punctually come forever and ever. On this Shabbat, we recall those who died during this past week, these past 30 days, whose families are in the midst of Shiva and Shloshim. As I read the name of your loved one, if you're here, if you could rise, please, and remain standing so we can comfort you in our midst. Faye Anticole, Brandon Colton, Judith Calla, Anita Curson, Carol Schofler, Irvin Smith, Isabel Somech. And those for whom the Yortzeit, the anniversary of the death of your loved one, is on this Shabbat, if you too could rise as I read their name. Raphael Buchstein, Joseph Awaskin, Diane Faber, Etty Fisher, Bernice Franzblow, Jay Goldberg, Nina Granovskaya, Jack Goralnik, Gerda Halprin, Louis Hendon, Gladys Kahanovitz, Mary Klonoff, Harry Landa, Bonnie Lerman, Jonas Ludvigson, Mott Mahler, Baruch David Mutzakel, Max Nacht, Leon Penn, Hans Philipp, Ann Polsky, Benji Robinson, Rita Rosen, Theodore Schatz, Annette Shaffrin, Mary Simon, Seymour Steinman, Janet Street, Bessie Weinstein, Violet B. Weiner, Sam Zingerman. If there's others who have come to say Kaddish, names I've missed or mispronounced, if you could rise and share them in the midst of our congregation as well. We stand now as we join with those who are in mourning to provide the comfort of our presence so they're not standing alone at this time. We recall all of those who've died in defense of freedom and justice, victims of terror, this land, the land of Israel, around the world. Those who died in the Shoah and the Holocaust have no family left to remember them. We recall them for blessing as well. Page 598, Kaddish Yatom. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, v'yoma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'yimaru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lamei olmaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitroman v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudesha b'richu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damin ron be'alma v'yimaru. Amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimaru. Amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu'ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'kol yoshvei tevel v'yimaru. Amen. May the source of peace and peace to all who mourn comfort the bereaved among us, and we say together, Amen.
Amen.
So, Etan, if you want to join me over here with Kiddush, I think we're doing it together, or you're doing it with the cantor. But we have your Kiddush cup, so you got to come join us.
We have you. This is your Kiddush cup, is it?
So this is the cup you guys use for Shabbat at home, is that right?
This one?
He brought it in, so it's definitely your cup. Yeah, then that's the one, right?
We'll do it together, okay?
It's your Zadie's cup.
Oh. You can hold this. Start so. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, b'shabbat kodsho be'ahava u'bratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh bereshit, ki hu yom techila lemikra'ei kodesh, zecher letziat Mitzrayim, ki banu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim, ve'shabbat kodecha be'ahava u'bratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. Amen. You can take a sip. Grab the sheet here. We're going to uncover the challah.
What could be under the cover? It's a challah.
All the way, all the way.
Could have been anything.
All the way. There you go. Beautiful. Lift it up. Baruch atah
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, motzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Take a bite of the challah. We're going to turn to page 625. We sing this all the time, but by special request of the family, we'll join with our cantor in Adon Olam, page 625.
Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yesir nivra, leit nasa v'chefso kol, azai melech shemo nikra, ve'acharei kichlot hakol, levado imloch nora, vehu haya, vehu hove, vehu yeh betifara, vehu echad ve'en sheni, lehamshilo leachbira, veli reshit veli tachlit, velo haoz ve'hamisra, vehu eli וחי גואלי, וצור חבלי ויצרה, והוא ניסי ומנוס לי, מנת כוסי ביום אקרא, בידו אפקיד רוחי, בית אישן והעירה, ואם רוחי גבייתי, אדוני לי ולא אירא.
Services tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Torah studies online at 8:30 via Zoom. Please join us in the Shalom Garden for an oneg sponsored by the family. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.